The first car horn sounded while I was having sex with Maeve. I turned my head and saw that it was 2:30. "Damn," I said, "right on time." My wife laughed. We both knew that my best friend Frank was soon to pick me up for a 4-day hunting trip, but when I found Maeve slumped on the arm of the couch, I couldn't help myself. I only had to work half a day this Thursday at the start of my short holiday, and I already showed my wife how much I'd miss her when I got home from work 2 hours ago. This first action meant that the quickie she asked for on the second lap wasn't that quick, and hence I was there before Frank arrived. The horn sounded a second time, and I reluctantly ran from the living room through the hallway to the front door. I stuck my head and hand through the door and gave my friend standing next to his Ford F-250 a raised finger to signal that I would be coming out. In a minute, returning inside, I closed the door and leaned my back against it. Maeve laughed again, and I couldn't help but laugh with her. She was clearly not ready to go out to Frank to buy me time to get myself in order. Not like this, when she was wearing only a short nightdress that would show her buttocks. I walked the other way through the hallway into the small bathroom and quickly washed myself. When I came out, I struggled to zip, button, and belt the pants that I had left on. The owner of the house was now standing at the door. She was so beautiful that I was ready to cancel the entire hunting trip and stay with her. And I would have done so if she had not handed me my quilted parka. I walked over, took it from her, and leaned in for one last kiss. Then I picked up the gun case and bag of things that were lying by the door, and Maeve opened it for me. As I walked out onto the porch, my wife cautiously poked her head around the door, smiled, and waved to Frank. Maeve was adventurous, even daring in bed, or in the living room, or in the kitchen, but this mischievous streak ended at the door. I'm sure Frank would have been pleased to see her in a nightdress without panties, but such teasing or frivolous antics were not Maeve's style, and that suited me quite well. Frank equipped his huge pickup truck with everything he could need for hunting, butchering, and transporting game. He argued that such preparation greatly increased the chances of success. He opened a locked box behind the cab, and I put my gun case in there next to his, and my bag in a plastic box attached to the side wall. Then he pulled the soft cover back over the body. I climbed into the cabin and looked at the porch again. The front door was closed. Frank drove out of the yard and headed towards the highway. "You stink, dude," he said evenly after we had driven for about 20 minutes. "Sorry, buddy." "And makes you sweat like a pig. I smell your armpits, not her feet." I just laughed. We quickly arrived at an old house that had belonged to Frank's family for several generations. Since he got divorced, he's been coming here more often and has made some big improvements over the last few years, including upgrading the insulation and heating so we don't have to stay in the parks all the time. This season he installed a satellite dish, which not only received many channels, but also provided access to the internet. "Cellular service here is still unreliable," he said, showing off the upgrade, "but you can use WhatsApp over Wi-Fi if you want to call Maeve. You know, she doesn't really expect a lot of calls from me, and I actually like to disconnect from the world sometimes, so I guess I won't tell her that we have the internet here for now." We had dinner, and I read John Sanford's novel while Frank sat at his laptop. We both sipped on one beer for the evening. We weren't the stereotypical detached men going on a drunken weekend without their wives. We really came to experience the outdoors and maybe fill our freezers with some venison. "Holy saints," Frank exclaimed. I closed the book, but left my finger inside. I expected the exclamation to continue, but Frank's eyes were still glued to the screen. He was clearly reading, scrolling the page. "Holy saints twice," he said, before looking up from the screen and staring at me, wide-eyed. Then his face took on a doubtful expression, as if he suddenly thought that he shouldn't have called me. I replaced my finger with a bookmark and asked, "What's there, Frank?" Did he watch the news? Did my house burn down? Or did Maeve have an accident? His voice and face became sad. "Crap, you will see for yourself." He rotated the laptop 90 degrees so that the screen was facing the empty chair to his right. I crossed the room and sat down at the table. I forced myself to look at the screen, expecting to see the terrifying headline. It was not a news site, but some kind of social site. On the screen was a photo of a smiling Maeve. The smile was very mischievous. I took this photo a year or so ago. I looked at Frank. What the hell? What is this? Sorry, Matt, but this is a dating site, he answered helplessly. Dating site? I didn't immediately understand what was happening. Listen, he said, you know that after Tracy and I broke up, I was depressed, and I just sat there for 6 months or more. Then one day I woke up feeling horny and started checking Tinder and other sites to meet women. Meet women? I looked at him more closely. But you were horny, So, some of these sites skip the dating stage and go straight to sex. There are many single or adventurous women widows, divorcees. Now his voice faltered. I stayed away from them, but there are wives there too. Wives? Well, yes, there are wives, and a lot of husbands, who are looking for fun on the side. I looked at the screen again. Below on the page was another photo of my wife. Her curvaceous Irish milk body was tempting posed in underwear. My stomach churned. Maeve. But the profile did not indicate Maeve, but lonely little girl. Listen, Matt, listen, man, let me tell you something. Another thing I discovered is that these sites are full of crap and even scams. He nodded towards the laptop. I have come across fake profiles more than once, profiles that use a woman's name or image without her knowledge. Maeve could have been a victim. I mean, I've never seen her on this or any other site before. I mentally grasped at this straw, looking at the profile. The photos were definitely Maeve's. Perhaps they were hacked from our computer. Then I noticed a detail that seemed to stick into my heart like a needle. The lingerie she was wearing in the second photo was sexy, but still stylish. Black silk top with thin straps and thong with lace edges. Underneath the thong were sheer black thigh-high stockings. The whole set cost almost $100. I knew this because I bought it for her last Christmas. This photo was taken less than a year ago, and I didn't take it. I started reading. So, no matter your age, if you are clean and match the description, please send a photo and let's meet. I'm alone for the whole long weekend, from Friday to Sunday, and would really like to have some intimate time. Below the profile, there was a field. Current status, closes soon. I looked up and met Frank's eyes. Problems? What the hell? Listen, this could be a good sign. He must have seen my eyebrows rise to my hairline because he quickly continued. No, really, dude, some of those cheating wives I was talking about, they aren't necessarily unhappy in their marriage or looking for a divorce. Sometimes they just have a certain fetish that they can't share with their husband. Maybe they want to try it with a woman or a black guy at least once. Or do they have fantasies about older men? I asked. Frank just shrugged. I looked at the screen again and continued reading. Then I got a lump in my throat, and I must have made a sound because Frank said, "You found what I call a double crap." Double crap, indeed. What? For crap? I know, Frank replied. I thought you might have been aware, but judging by your face, I see that you weren't. I had no idea, man. I had no idea. Frank and I were both completely confused. The description she gave in her profile clearly matched the description of me. Then I got to the triple crap. Below the description of what was ideal for Maeve was another field. Join the chat as Franklin's Free. I immediately realized that Franklin's Free was Frank's post-divorce dating site name. Clicking on it opened a chat window. I started scrolling through messages where all sorts of freaks were telling me what they would like to do with my wife's hot body, and she thanked them from time to time for such compliments. Then one message really pulled the rug out from under me. It was from someone calling himself Daddy 20. Daddy 20. Hi, baby. Had a great time last month. I hope you can find a place for me. Almost immediately, there was a response from Little Girl. Little Girl, my young soldier. Oh yeah, I can definitely find a place for you. PM me and tell me when I can see you again. Had a great time last month. I can definitely find a place for you. When can I see you again? Damn it! My wife wasn't just looking for one date, she was looking for many, and this wasn't the first time. She's done this before, I said, stunned. I looked at Frank. Can you determine how long she has been on this dating site? Because that's what he is, right? Or is it actually some kind of live sex show site? Maybe she's doing this for the money. I stared at the screen in horror, half expecting Maeve to appear live. Frank turned the laptop towards him again and began to search for information with the mouse. As far as I know, it's just a dating site. I don't think they allow full nudity, let alone sex. Chat rooms can be quite explicit, but you need to have an account to access them. Oh, I see you have already found it. He continued his navigation. There are a lot of professionals and semi-pros on these sites, but I don't see any warning signs. He added in a confused voice, everything indicates that she's doing this, for pleasure. He looked at the screen again and changed the subject. Okay, here's an interesting point. Tiger Pop writes, glad you decided once isn't enough. Okay, she finally says, I thought one time would be enough to cure me of my naughty crush, but I hope another round of injection therapy will be enough. I hope you can come. Frank looked up from the screen. Well, if you read between the lines, it looks like her secret fantasy was to drive a train, and this would only be her second time. But she said she didn't expect to do it again, he added quickly, as if that somehow meant my marriage wasn't over yet. She also thought that once would be enough, I growled, if it really was just one time. My shock began to turn into anger, and she arranges a whole weekend while I'm in the mountains. She tells this bastard that she can make time for him. How many fucking dates does she have planned? I barked at Frank. Hush, Matt, hush. There is no calendar to show when it is available. It's like a pop-up site designed for quick meetings, not long-term relationships. Make a date with her, I said. What? Her profile says this pop-up site will be shutting down soon. See if you can make a date with her this weekend. I want to know if she's really cheating now while I'm here in the mountains. Well, I could try making a date, he said, although his voice made it clear that was the last thing he wanted to do. But I don't match her description, plus she wants to see a photo. It struck me again. She wants to see my photo. I wondered what she would say if she received it. I told Frank my idea of going on a date with her using my own photo, and he said it was a really good idea. Don't be one of those fools who just let it happen when they have a chance to stop it. I then reminded him that it was too late if she had done the same thing a month earlier. This made him think. Then I said that I could ruin it this time by sending a message in the chat that I was coming home with a gun and would be looking for all the bastards who were talking to my wife. That's when he changed course and said it was probably best not to give her any warning. Listen, she said she has Friday, Saturday, and Sunday free, so she'll be making dates on those days. Frank and I both took Friday and Monday off to give us more time to hunt on our licenses, so I wasn't expected home until Monday afternoon or evening. If you interfere in the chat or send her a message on WhatsApp now, she will have time to cancel any dates and prepare her lies and excuses before you return. The anger was clear in his voice, and I remembered that his wife Tracy seemed to suddenly leave him, and only months later did he find out that she had been cheating on him with her boss for a long time. But if we go there now, you'll be able to stop this madness before it even starts, but you'll still catch her red-handed, in person, and with evidence. He nodded and glanced disdainfully at LTL Jill's profile on his laptop. My house was a little over 3 hours away, and we discussed all the options as we drove along the mountain roads and then the highway. The conversation ranged from catching Maeve right now at our house to spying on her and ambushing everyone who came for a date. But the most serious discussions centered on divorce, which would likely be inevitable whether the dates could be stopped this weekend or not. Frank's divorce was not pleasant, but his painful experience will hopefully protect me from the worst consequences. We repeated all possible options 3 times in 2 hours and drove in silence most of the rest of the way. When we got to my street around 10:45, Frank slowed down, preparing to stop at my house, but I said, "Keep driving." He glanced at me, but stepped on the gas again without a word. "Return, go around the corner and stop," I ordered. He did so, then looked at me again. "There is a car parked on the street opposite our house. I don't recognize it, and no one parks on the street at night here. Everyone parks in their driveways or garages. She's already started, and she's doing it in our own home." Touching the doorknob, I said, "Thanks, buddy. You can go." "Hell no, man. We have a plan. We either go check everything together, or we leave together and deal with it tomorrow." "No, I need to know now," I said. "One way or another." "Come on, Matt. We have already discussed all this. If she's alone, it won't prove anything, but you'll still be on edge, and who knows what you'll say or do." "I need to know," I repeated. "Okay, plan B then." He switched gears. "Maeve and I live in a quiet area with a lot of older people, so there's not much going on outside at night, and many of the houses have no lights on anymore." Frank spoke firmly as we headed towards the alley that ran behind my house. "Whether she's alone or not, we do the same thing. We look around and then leave for my place. My own divorce taught me that this shit is serious. You have to think things through carefully before you pull the trigger." He must have suddenly remembered my Socko Finlight .308 rifle, which was in a locked box welded to the bed of his truck, because he quickly added, "Of course, I'm speaking figuratively." Of course, I thought. Frank parked at the end of the alley, and we walked quietly towards my house, trying to stay in the shadows. I lifted the lever on the outside of the alley gate, hoping Maeve had forgotten to lock it again after taking out the trash for tomorrow's collection. As usual, she never locked it. We slipped inside and hid behind a large oak tree. Our bedroom was in the back left corner of the house, which meant it was on the front right from our current vantage point, and we could see the dim lights behind the curtains. Frank and I quickly and quietly crossed the yard. Our bedroom had windows on two outside walls. We crept up to the large window in the back, Frank to the left edge, I to the right, near the corner of the house. Unfortunately, the curtains served their purpose well and blocked the view. From 4 feet, Frank shook his head, making it clear that he, too, could not see anything. I walked around the side of the house and saw a thin strip of light in the middle of the window. I crept up and cautiously looked through the gap in the curtains. I had an excellent view of the bed from the side. She cheated on me. At least he looked like my father. Or maybe this is me 25 years from now. His hair was thinning, but still black and curly like mine. He had an extra 10 pounds around his waist, but the muscles accumulated in his youth were still visible. I was almost opening the holster when I felt a hand on mine, stopping me from pulling out my multi-tool. It was Frank. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling me not to make any noise, and then grabbed my wrist, trying to pull me away from the window. I resisted and was about to push or hit my best friend when he suddenly let go of my hand and I fell on my butt. I looked at him and he raised his hands in the air, turned around and started walking towards the back gate. I caught up with him halfway down the alley and we walked back to his truck together. I stopped next to him and looked at the vinyl tonneau cover, imagining the lockable box underneath. I knew it contained not only 2 rifles, but also a .357 Magnum and 2 cans of bear spray, which we carried for protection in the mountain forests. He ignored the pleading in my eyes and reached for the door handle. "We've been here too long," he said. After I climbed in, he drove out of the alley. There was a grocery store 3 blocks away at the intersection of our street and a larger avenue, and he pulled into an almost empty parking lot. The store closed at 10 o'clock and only a few employee cars remained in the parking lot. "Why don't I go there and start destroying everything to hell?" I asked. We had already discussed all this on the way from the mountains, but I needed to hear the voice of reason again. "Because you're going to jail," he said, as he had said several times before. "Plus," he continued, "it's not his fault. Sorry, dude, but he didn't seduce her like Tracy's boss. Maeve invited him herself. He probably doesn't even know she's married. And I need to act coolly and carefully if I want to get out of this marriage with as few losses as possible. I said in a dead, robotic voice, repeating Frank's mantra from our trip home. Back at Frank's apartment, the first thing he did was lock all the guns, including the bear spray, in his gun cabinet. He was adamant that he wouldn't let me get close to the weapon while I was still in shock. We then settled down at the counter, separating the kitchen from the living room. We may have limited our drinking at the cabin, but now Frank poured us tequila shots, which we downed in a silent toast to the damn world. Then he poured 2 more shots, but we already savored these, washed down with cold Pacifico beer. "She's cheating on you." "With you," Frank said thoughtfully, returning to this strange and confusing core of the mystery, as we had come to call it. "Maybe she's trying to bring back the spark from when you first met," he suggested. "I was not 55 years old when we met, and besides, it's not like our marriage has cooled down. Damn it, I had sex with her yesterday between the time I got home from work and you picked me up." "Yes, I remember that smell." "So," he drawled, "maybe she really loves you and wants only you. But more than you. Maybe she thinks the daddy thing is the best explanation for why she wants that type." I pursed my lips and shook my head to show what I thought of the idea, but he continued to develop the theory. I finished my tequila. "What if you don't blame her for this, but instead suggest opening up the relationship? If you help her meet her needs together instead of her doing it in secret, you can control the situation and have some fun yourself." I took another look at him. This time he said, "This will not happen in this universe." Then I handed over the empty glass for another serving. Not surprisingly, we overslept on Friday morning, but as soon as we woke up and more or less came to our senses, we proceeded to those parts of yesterday's plan that still seemed healthy. Frank and I weren't expected home until Monday night, and he convinced me to make good use of this time, despite my still strong desire to just walk in the house and start tearing this traitor to pieces. First, Frank took me to a car rental agency, and I rented the most unremarkable sedan there. Then I went to a bank that Maeve and I didn't use, opened a checking account there, and applied for a credit card. I transferred more than half of my savings and about 20% of my checking account there, leaving enough money to cover our current joint expenses. I thought about going into work and changing my deposit details in HR finance, but didn't want to explain why I was still in town instead of out hunting. That could wait until Monday. From the bank, I headed to the T-Mobile store and bought a dual SIM phone with the latest camera features. I signed a new contract in my name, only with a new address and bank account. I didn't want to change anything on our family account because that would likely trigger a text message to Maeve alerting her to what I was up to. Sir, is everything all right?" I blinked and realized I was still sitting at the table with the T-Mobile employee. She was explaining to me how to switch between 2 SIM cards, and I obviously zoned out when I started thinking about Maeve. "Sorry," I said. "I just got bad news." "I'm sorry to hear that," she said sympathetically. She quickly completed the checkout and wished me luck before I left the store. Frank and I met at Starbucks and discussed the next step of the plan over coffee. We then returned to my neighborhood to make it a reality. We left Frank's truck in the same supermarket parking lot where we had left it the night before, only now there were plenty of cars to hide among. Frank drove us in my rental car down 3rd Street to my house. This time, when we drove by, there was no strange car on the street, and Maeve's car was also missing. We drove into an alley, and I jumped out, going through the back gate, which Maeve again didn't lock. On another day, I would have been a little angry about such a careless attitude towards safety, but today I was just glad. Of course, I could just walk in through the front door, but then the retired neighbor might see me and then mention it to Maeve. It's better to stick to spy methods for now. Frank drove into the supermarket parking lot to watch. 95% of the time, Maeve and I walk home along Tompkins Parkway, turning onto 3rd Street at the supermarket. The observer for the half hour I was going to spend in the house seemed a little paranoid as Maeve had to be at work, but better safe than sorry. I entered through the back door into the utility room and from there climbed a folding ladder into the attic, where I selected an old canvas bag and backpack left over from old luggage. I had more interesting things, but they were in plain sight, and I wanted to leave as few traces as possible that I had been in the house and taken something out. From the safe in our home office, I took my passport, social security card, will, birth, and marriage certificates and put them in my backpack. There was an envelope with $2,000 in cash, and I took half. There were also gold coins that were probably worth about $5,000 at today's prices. I knew there was little chance Maeve would open the safe, but I didn't want to accidentally cause her to panic or call the police if she noticed they were missing, so I left them in place for now. I'm going to work on Monday to change the bank and so on, but I didn't want to go there in dirty camo pants, a flannel shirt, and scuffed-up Timberlands, so I grabbed a few pieces of work clothes from the closet and drawers, not too many for Maeve noticed their absence. Now to the hard part. While we were at Starbucks, Frank and I played with my new phone and figured out how to take time-lapse photos and set up cloud backup. I decided to shoot in time-lapse mode because I didn't want to record sound, thinking that watching her have sex would be quite painful without sound. I placed the phone on the cabinet that stood against the wall, hiding it among the hats that were stored there. I took a few test shots to make sure the phone would capture the bed well, and left it there to record evidence of the destruction of my marriage. Before leaving the bedroom, I slightly moved the edge of the curtain on the window where Frank was trying to peek, creating a small gap through which I could peek the next time. Of course, I didn't tell Frank about this part of my plan because he was categorically against any further espionage. I moved to the living room for the last task. As part of another upgrade to the old hunting lodge, Frank installed trail cameras to keep an eye on the game. We grabbed one of these cameras before returning from the mountains, and now I've mounted it on a high bookshelf to capture the sitting area in the living room, with the door in the background. It didn't have a download feature, so I had to pick up the SD card later to get the images. The new phone in the bedroom was set to upload data to the cloud every 6 hours to conserve battery power and not alert Maeve by constantly being connected. We agreed that I would spend no more than 30 minutes in the house, and seeing Frank's tense face, I relaxed a little when he saw me walking through the supermarket parking lot after only 25 minutes. We both stopped at the KFC drive-thru and were now sitting at Frank's dining table with food and notepads filled with to-do lists and ideas. I had almost no appetite, but chicken strips and potatoes were a light snack. I was more interested in the double shot Jack Frank put in my Coke. "You need to write to her," he said. "We need to maintain a semblance of normality." Maeve knew that the cell phone signal in the mountains was terrible, and most likely she was counting on this so that she would not be distracted during the date by awkward calls from her husband. But our proven method of partial communication was to always have a text message ready to be sent when there was a signal along the way. I stared blankly at the message screen. What the hell should I text her? "Everything is fine. I hope you have good sex there." "Give me this," Frank said, snatching the phone from my hands. "You will write what you always write." He scrolled through the message history, apparently to understand how we usually communicate via SMS. "Oh wow, you naughty ones. No, we will not write this. Okay, here's something suitable, quick messages on the run." He said out loud that he was writing, "Hello, dear. Calm road, good weather. Tomorrow morning early on the trail. I'll write later. Kisses, Matt." He then pressed send and immediately sent the following message. "We're getting ready to go out. The weather is still good. I feel like I'm going to get lucky. Love you." Then he started entering a new phone number. "Okay, the next call is to my lawyer and yours if necessary." Frank said Kelly David saved him from an even worse blow in a court system that favors a wife even if she was the one who cheated. He also mentioned that even though he knew he was losing in the courtroom, he was still pleased to see that Tracy was clearly nervous that his husband's lawyer was a 30-year-old woman who was as beautiful as she was. Dewitt's office answered the phone, and I listened as the lawyer seemed to take over the conversation, and Frank took a couple of minutes to catch up and introduce me. Then he handed me the phone. "Hey, Matt," Kelly said in a pleasant contralto voice. "I'm Kelly Dewitt, but I'm afraid Frank didn't tell me your last name." "Kara's, but please call me Matt. Okay, Matt. First of all, my condolences. I understand that all this fell on you out of the blue and that everything is quite disgusting. Yeah, pretty shitty. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize for the language. She laughed. Don't worry about it. If you can't let off steam with a lawyer, then with whom? I still felt bad about this teenage mistake, but I relaxed a little after Dewitt's words. Frank warned me that she was a person without unnecessary sentimentality, so I decided not to worry about it. So will you become my lawyer? Do I need a lawyer? Well, let's start with the second question. I realized that there was treason involved. Are you ready to forgive this and perhaps try to fix everything through counseling? The hell with it. Do you want to use this betrayal to influence alimony and so on? You're damn right, I growled. The thought of having to support Maeve and her wild life, the same way Frank had to support Tracy, made my stomach burn. Fine. This means filing for a fault-based divorce and going through court proceedings, for which I highly recommend getting an attorney. Okay, Kelly, that's what I thought. So can you represent me? Frank says you did a great job on his case. And Frank told you how much it costs. Said, well, I'll tell you this, Matt. Our prices have gone up a bit since then, but since you came on Frank's recommendation, I'll charge you the same rates he paid. Is this fair? Yes, that suits me. When can we meet? HM. Matt, this may sound a little flippant, but I want to be honest with you. If what Frank told me is true, this case sounds very interesting to me, and I want to take it on immediately. I can make an emergency appointment for you on Monday morning if that suits you. I covered the microphone with my hand and quietly said to Frank, she wants to get into it right away because she's interested in it. He chuckled and shrugged. I told you so. I said to Miss Dewitt, yes, that would be great. Do I need to bring proof? Proof? She asked. Do you already have proof? I thought you just found out about the cheating. Yeah, but we took screenshots of her profile on the site before it went down, and Frank and I both saw her having sex with some guy yesterday. And today I hid several cameras in the house. Cameras? There was a note of wariness in her voice, and she said the word so clearly that Frank heard her. He held out his hand for the phone, and I handed it over. Hey, Kelly, Frank said, I'm putting you on speaker. He did just that. So, for cameras, no sound, only video. And in fact, in the living room, there is only video, and in the bedroom, there are just frames every 15 minutes. Her voice became calm again. She almost sounded cheerful. So you were listening after all. Kelly Dewitt couldn't see my raised eyebrows, so Frank answered the question he saw on my face. The laws against recording a conversation without permission are much stricter than just video, and there's no automatic expectation of privacy in the living room. My new lawyer clearly realized that Frank had just taught me some of the finer points of watching a cheating wife and continued with the lesson. Surely your wife's lawyer will argue that she has that right to privacy in the bedroom, where I assume you installed another camera. It was actually a cell phone set to time-lapse, Frank said. Okay, I see. I can always argue that this is your home, not a hotel room, and since you didn't go overboard with 4 cameras from different angles, I'm pretty sure I could get a judge to allow me to use any images obtained if it came down to it. I hope their very existence will be enough to reach an agreement without a hearing. Frank joined the conversation again. Besides, don't you think her page on the website alone would be enough even without additional video evidence? You're probably right, Frank. There was sympathy and surprise in her voice. So she actually posted ads on the internet looking for partners. Did she specifically say she was looking for sex? I answered. She said that if she was interested in a guy, he would get a very hot date. Dewitt thought for a moment. And she was looking for guys like you? Yeah, I still don't understand what the hell this is. Look, Matt, I don't want to get ahead of myself until we meet on Monday, but let me ask one question. Have you gained a lot of weight lately, or are you having problems with sex? Yes, Frank warned me about Kelly Dewitt's directness, but this question still caught me off guard, and I answered her rather harshly. 6 feet, 180 pounds, which is 5 pounds more than when we got married, but I do more weight training than running, although I did run 2 10K races last month. Regarding the second question, I am still capable of 10 kilometers in this regard. A short pause, then. Okay, good to know. Okay, Matt, after we finish talking, I'll open a secure data portal and send you the access code. Frank knows how to get in. Send me everything you have, and I will review the materials before our meeting. Is 11 o'clock on Monday convenient for you? At 11 o'clock on Monday, yes, that's fine. I'll be with you. And Matt? Yes? Let me add my advice to what Frank told you. Stay away from your wife until we meet. I'd rather you didn't come back to your house at all. I only practice family law, not criminal defense. Understood? I thought for a moment. Understood. After I received the access code to the secure portal from the lawyer, and we sent screenshots of Maeve's profile from the site, Frank went back to my old phone. My cheating wife responded almost immediately to my 2 messages, which she thought were sent Thursday night and Friday morning. Miss you, but hope you're having fun. Happy hunting, love you. Now my divorce coach typed the following message, telling Maeve that we had not harvested the deer yet and were about to go to bed. He then turned off the phone and handed it to me. Wait a few hours and turn it back on. This will create the appearance that the message was sent earlier, but due to the weak signal in the mountains, it only arrived now. You read too many spy novels, I said, but inside I was grateful for his help. I would probably forget to keep in touch with Maeve or write the message incorrectly, which would raise suspicions. This way, she will be sure that I am safe and out of her reach. I wish I had the opportunity to collect such evidence, said my friend. Unfortunately for him, Frank only found out that Tracy had been cheating on him for almost a year after she left him, and all the court decisions had already been made. This meant that he was forced to pay the mortgage on the house in which his ex-wife still lived, and pay significant alimony for 3 years, in theory so that Tracy could get the education and training necessary to find a job that would allow her to maintain her usual standard of living. I hoped that Maeve's blatant adultery would save me from financing her philandering life in this way. We then began to apply Frank's hard-won knowledge by doing what people do in such cases. Since I handled most of our family finances, I had all of Maeve's logins to her bank and investment accounts. First, I changed the passwords for all these accounts. Then I changed the phone number on all accounts to my new number and the email address to mine. Just like with our home safe, I didn't expect her to go into online banking or investment accounts during her busy weekend, but when everything went down, I didn't want her to be able to grab my money. I canceled 2 spare joint credit cards after I paid off the debt on them from the joint account. I kept only the one she used for everyday expenses, but lowered the limit. Finally, 6 hours had passed since I set the new phone to record in our bedroom. It's time to test the first data upload to my cloud storage. I almost threw up when I saw what my wife was really doing. I set my new phone to turn on every 15 minutes, starting at a full hour, and take 6 pictures at 30-second intervals to capture a 2-minute window. During the first 5 episodes, only an empty bed was shown in the pictures. An hour and 15 minutes after I left the phone, Maeve appeared in the frame, and she was not alone. 6 crystal-clear images showed a guy. 15 minutes later, the same hairy backbreaker was already in my bed, with Maeve. The next series of photos showed only a rumpled, empty bed. After another 15 minutes, the bed was still empty, but it had already been made. I went back and checked, and yes, the pillowcases were different, so it looked like Maeve had changed the bedding. This was confirmed in the next set of photos when the new sheets were again wrinkled. "Oh shit," muttered Frank, who was next to me looking through the photos. "Is this her?" Yes. In the next series of pictures, the bed was empty, although I noticed a man's shoes on the floor and trousers on the side. After rewatching the previous episode, I saw that they had been there before. 15 minutes later, my brother was with Maeve. Next were pictures of an empty, rumpled bed, after which Maeve actually changed the bed linen. There were 10 series of photographs in total. 5 were empty, 5 were depicted with 2 more lovers. One reminded me of my Uncle Leo, and the other, as far as I could tell, was very far from a family resemblance. Leo appeared in 3 episodes, and a guy who looked like Kara's appeared in 2. "I need to get out of here," I groaned, swallowing bile. "Yes," Frank agreed. "Come on, I'll buy you a drink." "No, I need to be alone." "I don't think that's a good idea, Matt." "Damn it, Frank, I need to throw up, I need to cry, I need to be alone, okay?" "I understand, honestly. But if you get caught drunk driving, or if you slap someone, it won't make the situation any better." I assured him that I would stay away from the bars and my house, and that I would just take the highway. He wasn't happy, but what could he do? He agreed to send photographs of each to Kelly Dewitt. Before I left, he reminded me to turn on my phone so Maeve would receive my last cover message, and so he could check on me. I thanked him again and left, breaking 1.5 of my promises to him. I really stayed away from alcohol and really took the highway. However, I drove only 30 minutes north and 30 minutes ago, crying and screaming in pain and anger the entire way, letting the twilight turn into complete darkness. The supermarket was still open, so I parked among the shoppers' cars and walked down 2nd Street again, a couple of blocks to Elm, then halfway to 3rd Street and into the alley that runs behind my house. This time the trash cans were brought back into the yard and the back gate was locked. However, the fence was only 6.5 feet high. After I made sure that there were no neighbors nearby, I accelerated and climbed over the fence in a couple of seconds. Then I followed the tracks Frank and I had left the night before and sneaked my way to the back of the house. The gap in the curtain that I had left earlier that day was still there, and I had a clear diagonal view of our bed from its lower left corner. The last 2 sets of photos I looked at were empty with the bed made, which meant Maeve was between dates. Not anymore. I saw a scene that hurt in a different way compared to her previous dates. Maeve and a very young guy stood kissing. Was it Daddy 20? Or was it fucking me at 20? Seriously, it was like looking at photos from my freshman and sophomore years in college. He was maybe an inch shorter, but his torso was as toned and muscular as the long-distance runner I had been in school, and his dark curls were cut short like I wore back then. I turned on the video camera on my phone to film another of her lovers. Then I noticed that the clothes he was taking off were camouflage. Not a hunting camouflage, but a military one. What did she call him? Her young soldier? I suggested that he might have been from the nearby National Guard base, the same one where my father had last served. And this young bastard came all dressed up like a real American hero to be with another man's wife. I've had enough. I was already approaching the back door when the phone in my hand beeped. Incoming message. I ignored him. I was standing on the first step of the back porch when the phone vibrated and began buzzing with an incoming call. This time I looked at the screen. Frank. I declined the call. I jumped and nearly screamed when I suddenly heard, "I see you, bastard," coming from the darkness behind me. I turned around sharply. Frank stood there, looking over the fence at me. He must have been standing in the back of his truck. "Get out of here," he hissed, "or I'll start honking." I hurried back, making a lot more noise than I wanted, but if I didn't get rid of this bastard, the cops would be called a bunch of retirees make the best neighborhood watch. "What the hell?" I whispered to him. "Exactly," he hissed back. "She's there with some damn toy soldier. You know my father was in the Guard and received shrapnel wounds from NY in Afghanistan. And now this bastard is using this uniform to seduce my wife? I'll teach him some damn manners." I was seriously pissed off. "Get out of here, otherwise I'll call the police myself." But now, bastard. There were railroad ties on this side of the fence, so I didn't have to speed up to get up and over it. I jumped down into the back of his truck, landing with a nice thud, and watched as the 2 taillights on the porch of my house and the house across the street lit up. Bastard! We got into the truck and Frank pulled out slowly, leaving his headlights on until we were out on the street. We were in the back booth of a bar in a strip mall on Tompkins Parkway, 2 blocks from the supermarket. Frank made me drink a shot of Jim Beam and take a long swig of my bud before he let me talk. I've had enough. I can never sleep there again, but I damn sure won't let this disrespect continue. Okay, then let's stop this. It really took me by surprise. What? Give me your phone. He extended his hand. I gave it away. He went into my contact list and clicked on the top contact. Maeve. When the phone started ringing, he put it on speaker. The call lasted 5, almost 6 rings, then my wife answered, out of breath. Matt, why did you? I mean, what a nice surprise to receive a call instead of a text. I think you really miss. Hey Maeve, it's me, Frank. Frank, why are you calling me from Matt's phone? Oh God, something happened. Is Matt okay? I'm afraid not, Maeve. He got a little hurt. I don't think it's serious, but maybe I'll bring him back from the mountains tonight, and I want you to know. Oh God, what happened? Can I talk to him? What happened? Listen, calm down. It's not that bad. I didn't want to scare you, because it's not that serious, at least I don't think so, but I noticed that we had one of those rare opportunities where we got a good signal here on the mountain, you know some. That meteorological phenomenon, well, I thought I'd take this chance and let you know. Can I talk to him? Well, he's actually sleeping now. He hit his head hard on a tree branch in the dark, and he lay down with an ice pack and fell asleep. Hit his head. Do you think he has a concussion? Honestly, this is what worries me most. Maybe it's just a bad bruise, but I'll wake him up every couple of hours at night, and if he acts strange, I'll take him to the hospital in White River. Oh God, should I come to you? No, of course not. As I said. At this point, Frank simply fell silent, then picked up the phone and ran his thumb over the microphone, lowering it below the table. So there's no reason. Frank, didn't I hear the last part you said? Frank ran his finger over the microphone again. Just 1 stripe tomorrow. He then ended the call. Well, he told me, we stopped it. For the first time in the last 24 hours, since my world collapsed, I laughed. So, I will do the talking, right? Frank said as we walked down 3rd Street towards my house. Yes, I agreed again. Unless this asshole starts being rude. After Frank cut ties with my cheating wife, I had an urgent need to make sure our intervention actually worked. Frank was sure that Maeve would kick the soldier out of our house and cancel all her other dates now that she thought I was injured, but I needed to see for myself. He said, no matter what, I still think she really loves you, then raised his hand to stop my obvious, angry retort. I know, she has a weird way of showing it, but still. As we walked from the bar to my house, he said he drove past my house while looking for me and didn't notice any cars on the street. He suggested that, apart from the first guy who came on Thursday, even before Maeve's profile was closed, she asked all other visitors to park at the supermarket so as not to arouse suspicion among the neighbors. How kind of her to spare me this shame, I remarked sarcastically. Hush, I think it's him. I looked ahead and saw a guy passing under a street lamp, walking towards us. He was dressed in an army uniform and wore a camouflage cap. Frank positioned himself between me and the asshole as we walked by. Good evening, he said to the soldier. This bastard simply muttered something through his teeth. He looked clearly unhappy. Is little girl okay? Frank stopped and turned to the departing soldier. The guy froze in place and slowly turned towards us. Little girl? I don't know. Damn, Frank said, turning to me. He really looks like a younger version of you. The guy's brow furrowed, and then his eyes went wide as he looked from Frank to me. Young husband, meet a real husband, said my friend, a stunned guy. Do you like married women? I growled. Frank took half a step forward. Calm down, buddy, he said, not quite quietly, clearly hinting for the guy to hear. Hey, did you notice the pictures of a guy who looked like your older brother while he was at this married woman's house? Frank asked the stranger. Now I noticed his own anger. My buddy had been playing the role of Mr. Cool for my sake, but now, faced with the bastard who had turned him into a cuckold, his long-suppressed suffering began to surface. She said she was divorced, muttered the asshole. Not yet, but soon, I continued in my bearish voice. Oh shit. Then the guy ran. I prepared to chase him. He may be 9 years younger, but I would catch him in a block or two and literally walk on his back when I caught up. Frank turned to me and opened his arms in front of me. No, boy, no. For the second time in 2 days, I was close to throwing my best friend aside, but then I saw the anguish on his face. I lost Tracy to a cheater. I don't want to lose you the same way. I released some of my tension, but still could not contain the urge to follow the young soldier. You've already lost the main battle, boy. If you go after this asshole, you will win a small one, but you will lose the war. Attacking some guy won't win back Maeve or your respect. It will only put you on trial, cause more ridicule, and possibly land you in jail. I felt my shoulders drop as I watched his shoulders drop too. Can't I at least beat him up a little? I finally said. Maybe in 6 months or so, after we've given you a good alibi, he chuckled. Frank's truck was parked at the bar, so we got into my rental car in the supermarket parking lot. We waited. Yes, Maeve had clearly kicked the soldier out before they could finish the job, and yes, I agreed with Frank's assessment that we had succeeded in dampening her desire to continue this weekend of deception, but I still needed to know. Frank was starting to get tired of my obsession, but being an experienced cuckold and a good friend, he agreed to give me an hour. We spent the first half in the bar, enjoying a beer while the young soldier had to get down to business, and then we settled into my car. It paid off. A Nissan Sentra with out-of-state plates pulled into the parking lot and a man got out, but he did not go into the store. Instead, he walked to the corner and apparently looked up to read the street names. This placed him under a street lamp, and I rated him as cousin quality in terms of how much he looked like me. The asshole had come a long way, but then I remembered the photos she posted on her profile and realized that he thought it was worth it. He headed up 3rd Street, and as soon as the corner of the store was out of sight, I ran up 2nd. I made it to Maple, the street behind our house, then quickly ran from 2nd to 3rd. Frank was going to give this guy a little head start, then follow him down 3rd, mainly to keep me from attacking him on the street or from breaking into the house and finally blowing up at the sight of Maeve. I hid in the shade of a large tree on the corner of Maple and 3rd. The guy walked up the street, stopped to check the house number, and then turned onto the path to our front door. His step was brisk. I walked to 2 houses from ours and again hid behind a tree in a dark place between the street lamps. He rang the doorbell, then took half a step back and assumed a pose. The door opened halfway, the light from inside spilled out, but I did not see Maeve. I heard her voice, but could not make out the words. I assumed she told him something like date canceled, since the door closed in his face within 10 seconds. The guy just stood there, frozen in place, for a few more seconds. Then he must have remembered how far he had traveled to get here and knocked loudly on the door. The door opened again with a click. It must have been on a chain, and this time I heard her words. Sorry, but everything is canceled. Now please leave, or I will call the police. Then the door slammed shut again, and I distinctly heard the click of the lock being locked. This time I heard the guy too. The hell? Hey, bitch! He stopped his tirade when the porch light of the house next door came on. When that door began to open, he quickly turned on his heel and walked out onto the sidewalk. Damn it, retirees are real watchdogs. Unfortunately, I didn't want to be seen either, so I stayed hidden behind a tree until old Virgil Leonard stuck his head out the door and looked at the man walking away down the street. When the way was clear, I quickly crossed 3rd, resisting the almost irresistible urge to go up and knock on our front door myself. Frank was waiting for me on Elm, and we headed back to Tompkins together. As we approached the supermarket parking lot, we heard tires squealing as someone burned rubber while quickly backing out of the parking lot. You shouldn't drive in anger, Frank said. Very dangerous, I agreed. Back at Frank's apartment, we connected my laptop to cloud storage to view the second 6-hour archive. The first archive ended with shots of an empty, made bed, and this one began the same way, making us think that Maeve had taken a very long break between her lovers, at least until one series of 6 photos showed what I assumed was her intention to take a shower after having sex that happened off camera. Damn, I need to get the security camera out of the living room, I said. Monday morning, after she leaves for work, Frank replied, as planned. The next meeting was with the soldier, and it was completely consistent with what I saw through the window and what we assumed happened after Frank called. The hidden camera in the bedroom must have gone off shortly after Frank intercepted me on the way to finally putting an end to this madness, because the 6 shots began with a young goon sitting on the edge of the bed, his uniform dumped on the floor along with his other clothes. Frank and I looked at each other and smiled grimly. Her suffering will never compare to what I experienced, but it was nice to see her finally get her small share. "You're a petty bastard," Frank said. "That's what I am," I agreed. Both of us grinned. Frank then typed Maeve's next text message. "I woke up fine. I'll let you know if there are any changes. Frank." He then turned off the phone again without pressing the send button. "You're a petty bastard," I said. "That's what I am," he agreed. At midnight, we turned on the phone, and I immediately pressed send. We then watched as he was bombarded with incoming messages and missed calls from Maeve. "Do you want to listen to voice messages?" I asked. "No, I'm not that petty." I agreed again, and after the new messages stopped coming in, I turned off my phone for the night. On Saturday morning, after another restless night in Frank's guest room, I reviewed the camera images from the night before and found that Maeve was even more restless. There were no more visitors, but the sheets were rumpled from her tossing and turning as she managed to fall asleep. Without adding anything new, I began preparing photographs of Maeve's last 2 meetings to send to my new lawyer. "Should I play the video I took through the window?" I asked Frank. "Hell no," he replied. "What you got from the other camera is enough, and it's better if we don't tell Kelly about going to the house." "Do you think this young soldier shit his pants?" I asked, sending photos. Frank chuckled. "I wouldn't be surprised." Then his smile disappeared. "Hopefully, this will be enough for him to grow up and stop cheating before he runs into a husband with an unlocked gun." She could say she was divorced, but my gut tells me that some of these guys knew she wasn't, but they didn't care. "Damn, you just ruined my mood." "Well, let's send Maeve her morning call. That should cheer you up." I typed the message myself, turning on the phone and scrolling through another dozen texts and missed calls from my angry or crazy wife. "Hello, honey, it's Matt. Sorry Frank scared you, I'm fine. The patch, aspirin, ice, and sleep helped. I really don't want to leave without catching a deer, so I'll stay as planned. See you Monday night, love you." I hit send, and just as I reached out to turn off the phone, it rang again. It was my lawyer. "Hey, Kelly, didn't expect to hear from you on Saturday morning." "Hi, Matt. I was just checking your data portal and saw that you sent a new one. Is it as exciting as the first one?" I laughed. "I'm afraid not," I replied. "These are just the consequences of one unrecorded meeting and starting a session with a guy." "She's finally exhausted, huh?" Kelly said sarcastically. Then she sighed. "Oh shit, sorry, Matt. I wish you wouldn't take it too seriously, but this was too much. I'm sorry." No, it's okay," I assured her. "I'm so confused in my head that a little dark humor is just what I need to relieve the tension." I covered the microphone and asked Frank, "Do you think I should tell her?" He nodded. "Hey, Kelly, speaking of dark humor, I'm going to put you on speaker and let Frank tell you why Maeve's night ended with crying instead of fireworks." "Good morning, Kelly," Frank said. "Good morning, Frank. What have you done? I won't have to help you out, I hope." "I think you'll like this," he said, and told Kelly about his prank phone call and subsequent text messages. He left out the part about how I sneaked to the back of the house, or how we met the young soldier on the street. "I like it," she said when he finished. And you're sure she canceled all her other appointments and isn't calling them back now that she knows Matt is okay? Wait a second, I'll tell you, I replied. She just replied to my last message. I opened it and read, "To hell with the dear. Come home. I need you. I love you. Please come home now." "I told you, man," Frank said. "What were you talking about?" Kelly asked. "That she really loves him despite this crap." "Hey, Kelly, have you ever met people with serious mental illnesses who can't control themselves?" On the other end of the phone line, the lawyer was silent for a moment. Then a thoughtful HM came out of her mouth as she seemed to ponder the question. "I've had clients and client spouses with mental health problems, such as one guy who was officially diagnosed with a sex addiction and another with an adult video addiction. But I think it's possible. And now I have to come to terms with this," I blurted out. "Forgive her if she says it wasn't her fault. Kelly, have you seen the photos? Do you think I can ever stop seeing them in my mind every time I look at her, let alone make love?" "I don't think you can," Kelly said soothingly. "If she does receive a mental health diagnosis, it will likely affect the type of divorce and the division of property agreements. But I don't think any judge would refuse to grant you a divorce after the level of planning she put into getting together with these men." This conversation finally confirmed my decision. "Kelly, how quickly can you apply? I can't live with this woman anymore." "Yes, I can understand that," she said. "Look, Matt, I have a few ideas, and we'll probably need to meet with her and her lawyer before we decide what action to take. But I'll have the paperwork ready to discuss on Monday, okay?" "Fine. But what should I tell her on Monday night when I don't come home?" "You don't tell her anything. I'll do it." "What should I do now?" I asked. "I've read the list of actions you've already taken, and I think you've covered everything. Any further action may turn against you in the eyes of the judge. So calm down, stay patient, and don't step on your own rake." Frank chuckled and said, "Kelly, I'll tell you, I try my best to keep him from doing this, but he still keeps trying." "By the way," Kelly said, "Matt, you said you were still ready for the 10K. Frank and I froze and stared at each other with wide eyes. "Yes, I think I said something like that," I answered carefully. "Great, then go and run. Bye, guys." And she hung up. The phone rang again, but this time it was Maeve, so I turned it off. I took Kelly's advice and went for a run. Luckily, I grabbed an old pair of running shoes and other supplies while I was at the house. Frank went running with me, and I had to stop after 3 miles because it was already well beyond his comfortable distance. I still felt like a cornered tiger, so Frank suggested another way to release some of my pent-up emotions. We put our guns back in his truck and headed toward the mountains again. This time, however, we only drove for an hour before arriving at the outdoor shooting range where we usually went before every hunt to sight in our guns and brush up on our skills. The range operator usually set up deer targets for us, but this time I asked for human silhouettes. I had to buy more ammo at the range to keep shooting and ended up hitting 5 targets. When the range master saw the many holes in the face, core, and groin, he looked at me with a half-serious, half-dorky expression, but simply complimented me on my accurate hit groups. I shot 4 times more than Frank, so it was no surprise that he finished cleaning his gun long before I did and went to talk to the mechanic. I noticed that they were both looking at me while they were talking. "What did he say?" I asked Frank as we headed southeast again. Frank didn't sugarcoat it. "He said he'd seen this before and asked me if I could stop you from shooting anything other than paper targets." I said I could. Frank kept his word by immediately moving my gun from his locker to the gun safe as soon as we returned to his apartment. The rest of the weekend was pure torture, and Frank acted as my tutor to keep my mental engine from overheating from trying to figure out what had happened to my marriage. How could I not notice that Maeve had such extreme inclinations and desires? We watched Marvel movies, but he refused to let me look at the spy photos again. We drank great whiskey, but he limited me to 2 drinks. He also managed my communication with Maeve, not allowing me to read her messages and telling her, on my behalf, that I was feeling pretty good and was close to catching a deer, so I really wanted to continue hunting on Sunday. Then on Sunday morning, he texted that I was heading deeper into the woods and planned to spend most of the day at the hunting stand. "She's already started calling you an asshole for not coming home," he told me with a laugh. "Wait until she gets the divorce notice," I replied. I guess the petty side of me must have enjoyed this petty revenge, but mostly I just felt terrible. I loved this woman and never had any reason to think that she didn't love me just as much. Could she really be going through some kind of nervous breakdown that made her love me so much that she had to find men like me so she could keep having sex with me over and over again? I began to wonder if I might need as much therapy as she did. After my fourth sleepless night in a row, I woke up Monday morning feeling exhausted, but determined to move forward with my divorce. For a moment, I thought I could forgive her and try to repair our marriage, but the memories of how much she enjoyed every moment destroyed any such thoughts. For me, there was no turning back. We started the day by texting Maeve that we didn't have a good hunt on Sunday and we were going to go again today. I apologized again for scaring her on Friday, but assured her I was fine. We sent a message from the supermarket parking lot near our house, and her response came quickly. "You left me here to relive the whole weekend, and you still can't give up on this damn hunt, so you can come back early. Well, maybe you should go see Frank, because right now, I don't think I want to see you right away." I couldn't help but chuckle. The irony was that she was proposing to do what had been my plan all along. 15 minutes later, her car drove down 3rd Street and turned right onto Tompkins, her usual route to work. I drove up and parked in the alley behind our house. This time I didn't try to hide, but I still didn't want to attract the neighbors' attention by leaving the car right in front of the house. When I was sure everything was clear, I jumped over the back fence again and entered the house through the back door. I took the security camera and my new phone. Then I took a full-size suitcase from the second bedroom, which was a storage room and dressing room, and in the future, according to our plans, was to become a nursery. Well, this plan could be put to rest. My heart broke even more when I realized how far her betrayal extended, shattering my dreams. I filled my suitcase with clothes, and this time I took the gold coins from the safe, as well as my laptop. I assumed that she had already heard bad news from Kelly before he noticed I was in the house. Back at Frank's apartment, I removed the SD card from the security camera and plugged it into my computer. We watched as lovers came and met in my house. The mystery of the 5th visitor, whom we never saw in the bedroom, was solved when a man appeared at the door. When his shirt was removed, I saw a very elaborate tattoo of a tiger wrapped around his waist, the same tiger pop she mentioned in the chat under the name Little Girl. When he finally turned to the camera, I saw that the tiger's tail was tattooed so that it ran down his lower abdomen to his shaved privates. At first I was surprised that anyone could endure such pain. I felt sick and went into Frank's bathroom to throw up. While I was trying to empty my stomach, Frank did me a favor by cutting short video clips of Tiger Pop and some other bastards and sending them to Kelly Dewitt. After I had thoroughly brushed my teeth, I returned to the room where I was temporarily staying and collapsed onto the covers, fully dressed. I just laid there, covering my eyes with my forearm, until Frank called me and told me it was okay to watch the video again. When I walked out into the open-plan living room, Frank was standing in the kitchen, heating up sausage sandwiches in the microwave while his coffee machine roared. Ah, the life of a bachelor. "You should watch the rest of the security camera video," he said. "This should cheer you up." My laptop was set up on the coffee table in front of Frank's couch, and I sat down in front of him. That's when I noticed a shot of whiskey next to my laptop. 9 o'clock on Monday. Another sign that I had joined the ranks of divorced men. Well, why not? I drank the shot and forced myself to look at the computer screen. Frank was right. The video from the rest of Friday until Monday morning was much more enjoyable to watch than what I had previously seen. It was also informative. After the little soldier was sent out the door and his successor was denied, we saw Maeve again and again disturbing the camera by walking by as she paced restlessly around the house, usually holding her phone, talking or texting, trying to find out the condition of her wounded husband. This continued off and on throughout the night. Saturday and Sunday showed the same thing, with Maeve looking increasingly exhausted and increasingly angry as I seemingly ignored all her worries and pleas to return home in order to get my treasured trophy. One thing I particularly noticed was the order she kept in the living room. I hadn't noticed before, but a number of things that were usually in the living room were missing, but now they were back in place. Mostly these were photographs of me. Frank sat next to me. We ate sausage sandwiches and drank black coffee. "Damn," I said, "she really wiped me out, didn't she? Looks like that guard boy wasn't lying when he said Maeve said she was divorced." "Wait a minute, go back," Frank said. "Be back by late Friday." "What did you notice?" I asked, rewinding the video to one of the earlier fragments. "Look at her hands," he pointed out. Maeve walked back and forth in the living room, holding her hands up and actively typing. "What?" Then I answered my own question. "Oh, no rings." I fast-forwarded, frame by frame, to about 10:30 m. Saturday. Okay, here they are. She really played the part of the divorcee to the fullest. I did not send the lawyer any messages with recordings from the security camera after the events with the lovers, but I still gave her fragments from their appearance on the doorstep on a flash drive if she suddenly decided that she needed it. Kelly Dewitt, an attorney, walked up to me from behind her light wood desk to greet me. After we shook hands, she took a step back and just stood there, appraising me, so I decided to evaluate it. She was indeed an impressive woman, about 5'9" inches tall, wearing a well-tailored suit that showed off her slender but strong figure. However, I deliberately kept my gaze on her face. Her eyes were a dark amber color, slightly almond-shaped. She, on the other hand, ran her eyes from my feet to my head, visibly lingering in the middle. 6 feet, 180 pounds, long-distance runner with a little extra muscle weight. I think I can assume that the rest of your description is also correct. Luckily, she phrased it as a statement rather than a question because I didn't know what to say in response. "Have a seat, Matt. I'm sure it was a tough weekend. How do you feel?" Heavy is an understatement. "Anything new from Maeve?" she asked, referring to the messages I had already sent her, including the one where Maeve told me not to come home. Here's the last message that came in while I was parking. I handed her my phone. She read, "Darling, please forget my last message. Yes, I'm mad as hell at you, idiot, but I need you to come home as soon as possible. I'm dying here without you. Please, Matt, please." "Okay," Kelly said thoughtfully. "If the sentiments I perceive in this message are at least partially sincere, then it appears that your wife did not do what she did to get rid of you. In fact, my gut feeling is that once she finds out she'll never try it again. Hell, she probably never intended to do it again. Should I count on this? And I can't just pretend it never happened." "No, of course not. But if she really explains why it happened and swears it will never happen again, is there a chance that you can forgive her and move on with the marriage?" Kelly raised her hand to stop my immediate angry reaction. "I have to ask about reconciliation, Matt. The judge will demand it. And as far as I understand, you still love her." "I loved her. Now I'm not sure I can. You've seen some photos and short video clips, but you didn't have to sit and watch the whole damn Tiger show." I was amazed that Kelly didn't have to ask what I meant. Obviously, the Tiger guy left her with the same bad impression. She simply said, "I know what you mean. But as I said, I practice family law, and we should at least try to figure out if the family can be saved. And you need to consider that Maeve will probably fight to save your marriage. She can't force me to go to couples therapy, which I'll have to pay for, can she?" Kelly grinned. "I'm almost sure that in this case, no. Okay, let me tell you what I'm up to, and then we'll need to discuss property and financial issues. If you want her to be served with a summons as quickly as possible, we need to be ready to make an agreement. If I get a divorce due to infidelity, will I still have to divide everything in half and pay her alimony, because my income is twice as much as hers?" Kelly spent the rest of the morning answering these questions and more. By 1 p.m., including discussion over the sandwiches she ordered, she had outlined a plan that I thought would allow me to end my broken marriage with minimal damage to my future. It was time to pull the trigger, and I nodded to my executor, Kelly Dewitt, an attorney, to take action. With the phone on speaker, she dialed the number of my soon-to-be ex-wife, Maeve. The call was answered before the first ring sounded. Matt, where are you? Are you coming home? Are you okay? What the hell are you doing, asshole? Oh God, honey, I need you so much. Where are you? Mrs. Kara's, Kelly interrupted her sharply. What? Who is this? Oh God, she screamed. Where is Matt? What happened to him? Mrs. Kara's, my lawyer said more loudly. Frank and I realized that calling from my phone wasn't the best plan because we were afraid that she would ignore any call that wasn't from me or Frank. Mr. Kara's, Matthias, he's fine. He's not hurt. He's fine. In order? But Frank said, who are you and why are you calling me from Matt's phone? Mrs. Kara's, Mr. Kara's gave me his number so I could contact you because he wanted to make sure you would pick up. I assure you, he is completely fine. In fact, I'm afraid Mr. Spinner's reports of Mr. Karras's injury were a hoax, and here I would like to express my personal condolences for the unnecessary fear they have caused you with their hoax. Kelly stuck her tongue out at me. A prank? Prank. What the hell is going on? I'll ask again. Who are you and why are you calling from Matt's phone? Mrs. Kara's, let me reiterate that I am using Mr. Kara's phone with his permission, and I also need to notify you that this call is being recorded. Do you agree with this? Maeve's voice went in a new direction, still angry and scared, but even more confused. Recording? For what? Who the hell are you? Mrs. Kara's, my name is Kelly Dewitt, and I am an attorney with Green Family Law in Springville. Your husband, Matthias Kara's, has hired me to represent him in the matter of dissolution of your marriage. Dissolution. Yes, madam. Mr. Kara's has instructed me to do this as quickly as possible, but he also has no interest in this sordid incident becoming public knowledge if it is not necessary. Dirty incident. I could easily imagine Maeve, dazed and glassy-eyed, able only to repeat Kelly's words. I wonder if she was even standing. Yes, Mrs. Kara's. Normally, we would simply serve you with notice to file for divorce, but Mr. Kara's hopes that we can reach an agreement that will avoid litigation. The purpose of this call is to notify you of what is happening and to encourage you to hire your own attorney and have him or her contact me as soon as possible. Lawyer. Yes, madam. Do you have pen and paper handy, Mrs. Kara's? I'm going to give you my contact information so you can give it to your lawyer. What? No, I haven't. Okay, that's not a problem. After I finish this call, I will send you a text message with all my contact information. However, after this, the phone will be disabled, and you will not be able to contact me or Mr. Kara's through it. But I need to talk to Matt. This is all wrong. It shouldn't have happened. We love each other, and... Is he there? I need to talk to him. This can't be. Sorry, Mrs. Kara's, but Mr. Kara's is not ready to speak with you, so you will need to convey all messages for Mr. Kara's through your lawyer. I'm going to hang up, Mrs. Kara's. Please have your lawyer contact me as soon as possible. All the best. Kelly hung up while Maeve began her next confused sentence. That went well, she said as she sent her contact information to Maeve's phone and turned mine off. Her words were ironic, but there was sadness in her voice. Are you okay? I asked, although it seemed like a strange reversal of our roles. I love protecting wives, husbands, and children from abusive spouses, but cases like this make me tired and sad. There's something strange here, Matt. I think you are doing the right thing. This is the only possible solution, but I do not sense any malicious deceit on the part of your wife. For some reason, perhaps due to an uncontrollable sex addiction, she has destroyed the center of her life, and neither of you will come out of this happy. Damn it, I'm not even 30. Have I really already experienced the last happy day of my life? Kelly shook her head and body sharply to get rid of the dark thoughts. No, she said. It sucks, and it will for a while, but it's not the end of the book, just one shitty chapter. As part of our services, we will connect you with a therapist. If you take therapy seriously and follow the advice you receive, you will come out of this much faster, so I hope you do. Ask Frank. I know he won't mind if I say that he waited too long to use these services, and it cost him a lot of unnecessary pain. Yes, we did, Frank confirmed a few hours later as we ate chicken wings and chilled shrimp with Bloody Marys during happy hour at a downtown sports bar catering to office workers. I brushed it off as nonsense that a real man didn't need, but in the end, I just stewed in my own shit, like a clogged toilet. You talk to me sometimes, you could have talked more, I said, trying not to imagine his latest comparison. I know you were always there, man, but honestly, it hurt more than it helped. At least until I went to see a therapist Kelly recommended. But why? I asked. His face darkened. Because you and Maeve were so happy, seemed so perfect, and it only made me grieve more for what I lost. Especially when I found out that I had been living a lie for so long without having any idea about it. I didn't know what to say, so I just sipped my drink. Then, after I started going to Kelly's therapist, I was finally able to look at you two as a sign of hope for the future rather than a reminder of the past. His voice faded, and it all turned out to be another lie, I said. Damn it, he muttered. Damn it, I repeated and raised my glass for a toast. We clink our glasses quietly and take a long sip. When the secretary showed me into Kelly Dewitt's office, I half expected to see Maeve sitting there to ambush her, and my gut tightened. I must have exhaled quite loudly because Kelly giggled, waving her hand around the room as if to indicate that it was empty. No, it's just the two of us, she said. Sit down, Matt. When I sat down, she added, although Maeve begged to be allowed to tell you everything herself. If this were a TV show, it would be a classic clash. Then I guess I'm glad it's not TV. It was 3 o'clock on Tuesday, but I wasn't at work because when I went there yesterday to change my direct deposit and other information, my manager gave me that day off and allowed me to take the rest of the week off if I needed to. I spent the day mostly at Frank's, looking for my own apartment. I certainly had no intention of living in our desecrated house any longer. We'll have to sell it if Maeve can't buy out my share. I also went for a 5-mile run in the morning and another 3-mile run about an hour before meeting Kelly. I hoped that the mixture of endorphins and fatigue would help me remain calm during what I expected would be a test of my emotions. When she called me to set up the meeting, Kelly said that she had spoken with Maeve this morning and she explained everything that had happened. Kelly said I really needed to hear it in person because it was too weird for a phone conversation. Now my lawyer was looking at me with a sly smile that made her look damn sexy. Frank said she was hot, and he was right. I suddenly realized that I was glad that she was not at all like Maeve. Maeve was all curves, with wavy brown hair and a creamy skin tone, while Kelly was clearly mixed race, Hawaiian and white by my guess. The parts of the legs and arms that were visible were toned and tanned. Her hair was straight and black, and although she wore it professionally styled, I assumed it might have reached to her shoulder blades or below when worn down. Kelly said, I think I'll see the surprise on your face, but I can only imagine how much more interesting it would be if you heard it from the wife herself. Stop dragging on the intrigue, I said. What do you want to say? She did all this for you, Kelly said. I'm pretty sure my face showed more than the surprise she expected. What the hell? I nearly cursed, leaning forward sharply and slamming my fists hard onto the table. Kelly's smile faded and her gaze became confused as she noticed my knuckles turn white. This bitch is claiming that I knew everything and that I wanted her to sleep with a bunch of guys because it turned me on. My voice rose and I grabbed the edge of the low table, ready to tip it over. Kelly almost lunged across the table and grabbed my nearest wrist tightly. No. Oh God, Matt, no. I ruined everything again. I looked at her. I showed myself as a wit again. I didn't even think that you would take it like that. I'm really sorry. I half relaxed and tilted my head, asking a question. She let go of my wrist and sat up straighter in her chair. Maeve didn't say anything like that. In fact, she is heartbroken that you found out about this and are planning to get a divorce. Get a divorce. I hadn't thought about it in those terms yet, but that's what I was doing, wasn't it? Then what does do all this for me mean? Baby, she said in a quiet, depressed voice. Everything came to me at once. Maeve's passion was not related to incest, but to finding a father for her child, the same one we have been trying unsuccessfully to conceive for the last year and a half. Find a guy who is like me so he can give it to her since I couldn't handle it. I knew that she really wanted a child, and so did I, but I had no idea that she was so desperate that she was ready to take such crazy steps. Did she do this to get pregnant? I asked, looking for confirmation of my shocking conclusion. Yes, Kelly replied. Here, you need to look at this. She pushed several pages towards me. It was a lab report from some medical center dated 4 months earlier. I didn't see my name or Maeve's name there, but I recognized the name of her and the doctor requesting the tests. It took me a couple of minutes, but I finally figured out that Dr. Wellborn had provided 2 samples from patient 25473, and both tested well below normal, according to the attached chart. Am I patient 25473? I asked. Kelly nodded. But how did she get the samples? For the first time in our short acquaintance, I saw embarrassment on Kelly Dewitt's face. She said she told you to use protection a couple of times. We certainly didn't use this when we were trying to conceive, except for a couple of times a few months ago. She took samples for testing when I couldn't make a baby after about 11 months of trying. I said it more as a statement than a question, but Kelly nodded anyway. Then, after she got the test results, instead of talking to me, she decided to find guys who looked like me as donors and decided to accept their donation the old-fashioned way. My heart sank again when I remembered her comment in the chat about some kind of injection therapy to get rid of her problems. Kelly said, she mentioned that your health insurance doesn't cover art, which can be very expensive, and that you've already significantly reduced your savings to buy the home where you were hoping to start a family. I closed my eyes and let my forehead hit the table with a thud. Damn it, I moaned. No wonder you felt witty. She's just crazy. Oh crap, I exclaimed, sharply raising my head from the table. I began to furiously tap my finger on the report. That means I won't have to pay child support if her plan worked, right? Kelly's face became even sadder. You will need to get tested because your levels are low, but not zero, she said. But it probably won't be necessary. Why not? What happened? The knot in my stomach tightened even more. After Maeve and I talked this morning, and she realized that she had been exposed and that you were threatening to divorce, she went to her doctor. He gave her a pill for the next day. But today is not the morning after, I said. She was with the first guy on Thursday night. Well, actually, Dr. Wellborn called me to confirm that she was indeed taking action, and the doctor said there was a pill called Ella or something similar that you could take within 120 hours of unprotected sex. So Maeve is literally on the edge of that window, but Dr. Wellborn thinks it will probably work anyway. I didn't know how to feel about this. Maeve went to crazy lengths to get pregnant, but once she learned that I wouldn't be an obedient cuckold or raise another man's child as my own, she literally erased the mistake. The situation has gone from sad to tragic. Then another late realization hit me. We had sex right before I left for hunting on Thursday. She was clearly preparing me for the idea that I would be the father of a child. She would probably jump into bed with me again as soon as I got home to further convince me that I was with her on her time. She accepted all these guys and would have done the same to me on Monday. Lord knows what diseases she caught. My lawyer put her right hand on my left. I always thought the term lawyer handshake was a formal expression, but I appreciated the gentle warmth of her smooth palm on the back of my hand. Unfortunately, such vile details are an integral part of this case, she reassured. and the transmission of disease from one spouse to another is something we always think about. Firstly, to try to keep our clients safe, and secondly, from a cold standpoint, it could play a role in changing the terms of any settlement in our client's favor. But Maeve seemed to be thinking about this too when she organized her meetings. Matt, yesterday, after our meeting, I reviewed the camera footage that you gave me on the flash drive, and I noticed one strange moment at the beginning of several of her visits. The only moments I remembered were how quickly my wife pulled the guy into the bedroom. Damn it, I cursed. What? Kelly asked. She did this a month ago. I still need to get tested. Yes, Kelly drawled. She admitted it, although she insisted that this was the first and only time. She said she only sneaked out for one night back, then some story about a sick fraternity sister, and met only 3 men in 2 days. When that didn't work and your long hunting weekend coincided with her next cycle, she decided to invite more donors to increase her chances of getting pregnant this time. And again she swore that she would return to Fidelity immediately after that. Before it's time to get a younger brother or sister for my bastard, we agreed that we want to have at least 2 and possibly 3 children. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of how much of a betrayal her act had shattered my dreams. Were you talking about the camera footage and how it relates to diseases? Yes, Kelly continued. When you watched the camera video, did you notice how she often looked at the smartphones of her guests shortly after their arrival? Yes, I noticed. I thought she was checking to see if they were really invited. Kelly's face became stern. Well, turns out she was checking their latest test results. The disbelief must have shown on my face because she continued, Yes, I know what that sounds like. Since this was her goal, she agreed to dates only with those men who could provide up-to-date test results. And of course, she told them she was taking pills. So, I said to Frank, stunned, after telling him all of Maeve's maneuvers that night over pizza and beer, You do this too? Do you get tested regularly and keep the results on your phone? Well, yes, I actually do. And if I ever start dating again, I'll probably have to do that too. When do you start dating again? He emphasized. But yes, I would recommend it. I have to say, he continued, I'm surprised that Maeve's lawyer allowed her to give so many details right at the beginning of negotiations. Well, that's because she didn't have a lawyer yet. Kelly seems to have found her this morning, waiting in front of the office, and insistently demanding to talk to her right away. Kelly told her again that she needed a lawyer, but Maeve was convinced that once I found out the truth about her actions, I would give up the divorce and lawyers would no longer be needed. And how did it work? He asked ironically. Kelly said that until the very end of their meeting, Maeve was still convinced that her plan was so logical and actually showed how much she loved me that I would come home to her tonight. Frank's response was to offer me another beer as we sat in the kitchen of his apartment, where I would likely stay until I decided whether I could even live in the same city as Maeve, let alone live in the same home. A week and a half later, I was back in the Green family law office. This time, however, Kelly and I sat on one side of the conference room table, and Maeve and her lawyer, Randall Philpott, sat on the other. Mr. Carras, Miss Dewitt, said the plump, balding man, placing his hand on a stack of papers lying on the table in front of him. I'm afraid we have 2 problems here. First of all, Mrs. Carras remains absolutely determined to save her marriage to Mr. Carras. He paused and quickly placed his other hand on top of Maeve's as she tensed, as if about to scream words of love for me again or rush across the table to hug me, which I had not allowed when they first entered. Apparently mastering the lawyer's handshake is a real professional skill. I wonder if law school has seminars on the subject. When Maeve reluctantly calmed down, he continued. Secondly, in the event that reconciliation proves impossible, this proposed agreement, he tapped the papers, is completely insufficient. It states that the shares are divided equally, but does not include all the assets that should be considered as marital property, and the proposed alimony is too small and too short to not reduce the standard of living my client has become accustomed to in her marriage. I felt Kelly lightly tap my foot under the table. her way of saying, "I told you so." I nodded slightly, admitting my mistake. Although no, I still couldn't call it a mistake, because it was the right decision. "Mr. Philpott," Kelly interjected, "I hope you consider the fact that Mr. Karras has agreed to pay 60% of your own fees as part of the asset calculation. It also shows a remarkable sense of justice on the part of a man who has suffered incredible pain." Yes, I was actually going to pay for the lawyer who worked against me. I wanted this case to be concluded as quickly as possible, but since I truly believed that Maeve was more misguided than malicious, I wanted her to be treated fairly. Not fair in the sense that she will still get half of everything I own, including her future for a while, but fair in the sense that she won't end up on the streets and go back to her parents in the middle of nowhere, like bumfuck Idaho. But she continued to insist that she didn't need a lawyer because we shouldn't get a divorce, and even if she changed her mind, on her salary she could only afford some mediocre lawyer who moonlights in divorces. So I told Kelly to find someone to protect her. Not the best lawyer in town, but someone in the top 50%. And besides, my surprisingly pretty lawyer continued, interrupting Mr. Philpott's objection. "On the topic of standard of living, what about my client's standard of living? Have you seen the evidence, Mr. Philpott? What do you think happened to the quality of life of Mr. Karras, forced to imagine these images every day?" It was a little theatrical, but Kelly wasn't exaggerating. I really struggled with it. I had already seen a therapist twice and couldn't say it was helping, but both Kelly and Frank assured me it would definitely help. The irony was that psychotherapy was covered by my insurance, even though art, which could have prevented the need for it, was not. "I'm so sorry, Maddie, I'm sorry," Maeve sobbed. Philpott pressed her hand again. "Miss Dewitt," the 50-year-old man said solemnly, as if his younger colleague still had a lot to learn. "While I can certainly sympathize with how Mr. Karras learned of his wife's actions, our state law states that these issues will not play a role in the division of marital property or the establishment of alimony." "In the case of an unresolved no-fault divorce, Mr. Philpott," Kelly replied sharply. "But if your client does not agree to the proposed no-fault divorce, that will not be the proposal we will submit to the court if the case goes to trial." She placed her hand on another folder, which was much thicker than the one Philpott had mentioned. "This divorce suit will be filed on a fault basis, with your client's infidelity listed as the only reason." She pushed the folder towards Philpott. "The terms of the settlement in this case will be much less generous than in the first." I noticed how his hand shook, as if he wanted to instantly open the folder, but was a professional to restrain himself. It's good that I found a decent lawyer for Maeve. While public disclosure of the facts of this case would be incredibly embarrassing for Mr. Karras, I suspect it could be even more serious for Mrs. Karras, especially if we call everyone involved in your client's multiple infidelities as witnesses and demand paternity tests for the child she tried to conceive with their help. Maeve gasped, making a sound of complete sorrow. "So, stop," Philpott was indignant. "There's no need to be so cruel, Miss Dewitt. You know full well that Mrs. Karras took measures to avoid possible conception, despite her urgent desire to give birth to the child they both dreamed of." "My child, our child," I exclaimed. Kelly not only put her hand on top of mine, but also pressed down on my foot with hers. "But he would still be ours," Maeve screamed. "He would be ours, yours and mine." The lawyers quickly agreed to a short break to consult with their clients, and Kelly led me into her office while Philpott took Maeve for a walk around the parking lot. "As I said," Philpott began when we reconvened, "Mrs. Karras is brave enough to take drastic measures, measures forced by her husband's overreaction, to make sure that the child was not conceived, even though which, I must add, he might well have been Mr. Karras's child." Kelly kept her foot on mine, clearly aware that I was ready to jump up and attack my wife's lawyer for his insults. My lawyer then switched to a different tone. Her voice became softer, more understanding, and she turned to Maeve. We understand that Mrs. Karras made a very difficult decision and recognize that it was the right thing to do under the circumstances, and Mr. Karras and I both recognize the pain she feels regarding this decision. Kelly's gaze hardened as she turned back to Philpott. Unfortunately, it has not yet been medically confirmed that her measures were truly successful. This was done at the last minute so she could still get pregnant. The only way I can proactively protect my client's well-being is to try to prevent this threat. I stole a glance at Maeve. She had always been a pale woman, but now she looked like a corpse, and I was afraid that she was about to faint on the floor. Kelly continued, "There is a clause in the no-fault divorce proposal that presupposes that the father of the child, if any, is not my client. However, Mr. Karras will agree to take a paternity test to confirm this assumption. If we file for divorce with a finding of guilt, we will naturally demand the same from all possible fathers of the child." Kelly wanted to add something like, "if she decides to keep him," but I vetoed that line. There was already enough blood on the table to stab the knives even more. Now it was Maeve's turn to put pressure on her lawyer's hand. They seemed to discuss their next steps during the break. "Let's put all that aside for now," Philpott said. "We would like to return to Mrs. Karras's original position that none of the proposed divorce actions will be filed. Instead, she and her husband will undergo counseling and work together to find a more amenable solution to save their family." Damn this legal nonsense. Damn these lawyers. Why couldn't she have done this from the beginning? I almost began to cry. Why, instead of just telling me about a medical problem that we could handle, she decided to become a woman of easy virtue? "Mr. Karras." "Matt." "Uo." 3 voices overlapped each other until I slammed my fist on the table. I slowly raised my head and said through clenched teeth, "I'm already in therapy," I said. "My therapist says this is why the question is like a bottomless pit, and I can't heal until I can stop it from growing." He suggested that I invite Maeve to a joint session in the future to discuss this issue. But now we're here, and I need to know, why did you decide to bring strangers into our bed instead of just telling me about a medical problem that we could work through? "My client will not," Philpott began, but Maeve interrupted him. "I didn't want to hurt you by telling you that you couldn't. You couldn't give me a child." I slowly raised my head and stared at her in disbelief. "Do you think my self-esteem is so big and fragile that I will break because my chances are low?" "No, no," Maeve insisted. "You're just so passionate about your health, and I didn't want you to think you were less of a man." "Oh God, am I really such an asshole?" I asked, wondering if I was so unconscious that I had never noticed such an obvious flaw in my character. "No," she repeated. "I'm saying everything wrong." She sighed and exhaled. "If we could afford Evif, I would tell you. But we would either have to go deeper into debt or wait years to save money, and we really wanted to start our family now." "So, for you, it was just a donation. Was it related to the search for new sensations outside of marriage?" "Exactly," Maeve exclaimed. "Oh God, you know how much I love sex with you. Why would I need to look for it anywhere else?" "So you didn't have any fun, sexually, with these men?" She shuddered at the last word, but bravely continued. "You understand, right? In fact, they were all you, weren't they? So even if I had fun, it was fun with you. All the memories I would have would be of doing this with you. Like in that multiverse of those comics you like. I could add memories of doing this with a younger or older you to the wonderful memories I have of doing this with you now. And when you think back on these encounters, perhaps while breastfeeding the child one of these alternate me made, would you always think about the real me?" She could not avoid another grimace at my caustic words, but courageously continued, "Yes, always about you." I turned my head and looked decisively at Lawyer Dewitt. She raised her eyebrows slightly in question. I nodded slightly. She reached out to another folder, circled in red the nuclear option folder. As I spoke, Kelly slowly pulled out a series of photographs and laid them out in front of Maeve and her lawyer. "And because you did all this for me, just to spare my feelings," I continued, "I will never have to wonder, when we make love, whether you are actually thinking about any of these other men, because all this was just for the sake of the donor. The first two photographs Kelly laid out in front of them were close-ups of Maeve's face. Because it was only for the sake of conception, I continued in the same tone, I won't have to be afraid of you remembering. Maeve turned even more pale when the next photo appeared in front of her. I will never be afraid that you will one day ask me to wear a military uniform for role play or maybe get an exciting tattoo. I will never doubt that I satisfy all your desires. My wife's face turned deathly pale, and she finally saw her actions through my eyes. She barely made it to the trash can by the conference room door before she vomited. Our house on 3rd Street sold quickly, and although we owned it for less than 2 years, its value increased significantly due to the demand of the area. Unfortunately, most of the profits went to pay for divorce lawyers. I left Frank's apartment and moved to another one that was more convenient for work. Maeve returned to her native wilderness, that same Bamfak, Idaho. It seems that the thought that she might run into me in some cafe was too painful for her. However, she was able to rent a small apartment there rather than return to her childhood room. She was not pregnant and was undergoing therapy. My ex-wife also found a decent job that allowed her to live a moderate lifestyle in such an inexpensive area. I'm glad because even though the child support payments I've been making for 5 months haven't been a major burden on me, I'm still glad that she won't be left destitute when they stop in 6 months. Yes, she brought this nightmare upon both of us, and thoughts of her insane betrayal still easily twisted my insides, but she was the love of my life, and I had no doubt that her remorse and regrets were as sincere as my own. In her last letter, she still hoped for reconciliation. Not so easy, as my British friend would say. Still, releasing anger and despair was an important part of my own therapy. Frank and Kelly were right. Regular therapy sessions really helped me understand that I was not just a loser whose life's journey had ended, leaving only 40 or 50 years of dull grayness ahead of me. One sign of my renewed sense of life was when Frank asked me to go on a date through one of his naughty dating sites. However, in the end, I gave it up. While it was nice to feel the rise of desire, it wasn't a scene I wanted to be drawn into. Frank will have to hunt far from the mountains without me. Speaking of Frank, the good deeds he did to help me get through this nightmare came back to him a few months after my divorce. Frank's ex-wife Tracy's boss, the man she cheated on him with and continued to live with, was caught harassing another employee. Unfortunately for him, he misjudged his victim this time, and she used her phone to record him as he hit on her, hinting that her career could advance or suffer depending on her reaction. She slapped him and filed a sexual harassment lawsuit against him and the company, which won her compensation and got him fired from his job and divorced. As for Tracy, without him as her boss, her true workability became apparent, and she left the company as well. She even tried to win Frank back, but was met with a cold shoulder. She then went the other way and threatened to go back to court demanding more child support. But Kelly Dewitt helped Frank and had one discreet phone conversation with Tracy's lawyer, where she laid out evidence Frank had collected too late to help in his divorce, but which he could provide if they went to trial again. They ended up simply selling the house in half, and Frank made enough profit to nearly cover the last 6 months of his spousal payments, after which he was finally free of the devious Tracy. As for me, once my final child support payment is made, I will also have fulfilled all of my obligations under the divorce agreement, and Kelly Dewitt will no longer be my active attorney. Green family law has a strict policy prohibiting attorneys from dating clients, but it does not appear to apply to former clients. I'm still not sure if I'll ask her out since she knows in such terrible detail what happened to Maeve, but I'll talk to my therapist about whether it's a smart move. However, whether it's Kelly or another woman, I'm starting to regain hope that happiness can still find me in this crazy world where love can go too far. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.